started with our monthly workshop. This month, our workshop is going to be presented by Portia Jackson, and Portia is one of our own. She's not only an MNPP member, and her family are members of the Mid North Promise program. She's also a former Children's Museum employee, but she's also a storyteller and just a lot of great things. Tonight, Portia is going to be talking to us about Harriet Tubman, and she is actually going to transform into Harriet, as you can probably see in our from her dress. So we're going to get started. I'm going to turn everything over to Portia.
Good evening. I am so glad that you have come to take a visit, and let's go back in time just for a spell. I'm wanting to share with you some of the triumphs of the life of Harriet Tubman, a woman of courage, a woman once also known as Moses, because she led her people to freedom. Harriet Tubman. Ooh, I can imagine the day. She was sitting out in Auburn, New York, on the porch of a home that she built with the proceeds of her pension from the United States military for her courage and honor as a spy for the Union Army. There was a time in my life, she replied, that I knew I did not want to be a slave. I didn't understand quite all, but I knew the tasks that were given, and I knew I had to complete. You see, I was born in Dorchester County, Maryland. And as a child, I was blessed to be with my mom and my dad. Some of my sisters and brothers were on surrounding plantations. I was born on a plantation, and I was owned by the plantation owner. For some reason, the time was that folk like myself were nothing more but to be their property, not one of my own mind to make any decisions for myself, but for them to make them for me and others like. And they called us slaves. Slave is not what I wanted to be. And I knew that there was a way. And I quickly found out in my mid-teens that I did not have to stay in this bondage of slavery, that I could seek out freedom on a system called the Underground Railroad. It was a secret machine that moved swiftly from place to place, from enslaved states to free states, where people like me could learn just what it would take to make a mission on a journey to freedom. It was risk-taking. It was dangerous. But the will to be my own person drove me to making sure that freedom was something I would call my own. Initially, I didn't want to go on my own, but I knew that if by chance I would make it to freedom, and that day that I did, I looked at my hands and I looked at my feet, and I knew everything was just fine because I was free, but I didn't have my family. and it just didn't seem right. So the same Underground Railroad system that allowed me to make it on that journey, I became known as a conductor on the Underground Railroad to help free others. I heard tell that they would say, Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff, wasn't scared of nothing neither, didn't come to this world to be a slave, and didn't stay one neither. I tell you, sometimes going through those woods with those mean men behind me, trying to capture me and take me back to that venomous snake of slavery. But it was something about just knowing that there was a star amongst the sky, known as the North Star, that we were to follow all the way north to the Promised Land. Now, the Promised Land was a free state where we would be welcomed to be our own people. The Promised Land often was Canada, and eventually I make it to Canada. But as a conductor, I had to make sure that all of the passengers that would come on this Underground Railroad passage with me, that we would get there and we'd make it there safely. See, I learned lots of things. I knew that the drinking gourd was the brightest star in the Big Dipper in the sky. And we knew as a conductor, it was my responsibility to carry folks from station to station until we made it to the city of brotherly love, to meet an abolitionist who would take our story and know about our hardship on our journey to freedom. A station master would be a person who would have transportation worked out and safe passage, and hideouts for us to hide in barns and in houses, and sometimes just in the woods as quiet as we could. And I had learned from others that there were certain roots and berries and even bark and moss from the trees that I could use to nourish us as well as keep us calm. Oh, a station master had a bounty even over their head, just like Miss Tubman, because if they knew that they were hiding fugitive slaves, it was against the law. But a good heart and a good mind and a will, folks were willing to do just that. And so the passages and the destinations that we traveled on the Underground Railroad were safe passages because people worked tirelessly and very vigilant to make sure that the Underground Railroad system was a secret. There was no telling, and you knew just who was your friend. Now, the first time I took off for freedom, well, it didn't work out so well, but it didn't make me stop trying. And so the very time I set out for my freedom, I landed in Philadelphia and I met an abolitionist by the name of William Steele. William Steele was the head of an organization and a newspaper called the Freedom Bureau. And there he was able to record the stories of the escapes of us traveling for freedom. And he put all of the stories that he was able to collect over a 10 or 12-year time period and write a book called The Underground Railroad. It was printed in 1872, sold only by subscription. And in that book, Mr. Steele accounts some of the stories that I told him of how I made it on the freedom journey. Now, through Mr. Steele, I met another noted abolitionist by the name of Frederick Douglass. And oh my goodness, I met Henry Box Brown, another fugitive. I was even able to talk with Nat Turner. And it was then I knew that the songs, these coded songs that were sang to detour the plantation owner and the overseer who directed or supervised our work in the fields, sometimes from sun up to sundown, my dear children. On one of the days that I was assisting some passengers on the Underground Railroad, it was down around Dorchester County, and they were singing a song, a coded song. And the message was about a possum. And this possum was being cooked for a wonderful meal. The overseer and the plantation owner thought that there was going to be some good victuals for them to take part in a little later. But really, what's happening was some of their property was about to go on a courageous journey. I want you to repeat this song with me. It is recorded in the book by William Steele. The possum in the bush. Better run means that whoever is going to try to go for freedom should now be prepared. The time has come. When they started chanting that the possum in the bush better run, meant that they had gathered their things and they were going to that secret spot to start their journey to freedom. And then when everybody relaxed and rejoiced too that the possum was in the pot, getting hot, well, they was already fulfilling their bellies, but there were those who were taking that journey to freedom. And I want you to know we made it. But as we left, we could hear that chant. There are other coded songs that were used on the Underground Railroad. Swing down, sweet chariot, and go down Moses, and wade in the water. But today, we're gonna sing this chant, which I heard in the echoes on a journey to freedom. Please repeat after me. Possum in the bush, better run, better run.
Possum in the bush, better run, better run.
Possum in the bush, better run on.
Possum
in the bush, better run home.
Possum in the bush, better run.
Possum
in the bush, better run.
Possum in the bush, better hide, better hide.
Possum in the bush, better hide, better hide.
Possum in the bush, better hide on. Possum in the bush, better hide.
Possum in the bush, better hide. Possum in the bush, better hide.
Better hide.
Possum in the bush, better hide. Possum in the pot, getting hot, getting hot.
Possum in the bush,
Bush, better hide.
Possum in the pot, getting hot, getting hot. Possum in the pot, getting hot.
Possum in the pot, getting hot.
Possum in the
pot, getting hot, getting hot.
I'm confused.
Possum in the pot, getting hot.
Possum in the pot, getting hot.
Now give yourselves a hand. Now to understand, possum in the bush, better run, better run. Possum in the bush, better run. Possum in the bush, better hide, better hide. Possum in the bush, better hide on. Possum in the bush, better hide. Possum in the pot, getting hot, getting hot. Possum in the pot, getting hot, getting hot. Possum in the pot, getting hot. Just imagine that the folks down in the slave quarters were getting their pedals there together to be able to get their ration of possum stew. But yet there were those who were risking their lives, and they were taking that underground journey to freedom. Meanwhile, Master wasn't very happy about his cargo coming up missing. But oh, was it a rejoicing moment to be free. Now, I understand that time had come, and Frederick Douglass, a dear friend of mine, had been speaking with the 16th president of the United States by the name of Abraham Lincoln. And they all was in a tiff about the issues of whether or not freedom should come to those enslaved. And then the war broke out between the Unions and the Confederates. And all that it was, and I knew that because I had made so many freedom journeys that there was something I could do. I become a spy for the Union Army. I crossed over those lines to the Confederates, and I helped nurse wounds and give acidity bags to ward off disease to the Union troops. I would sit around and I'd help mend and do and listen, and I'd take word right from the Confederates and give it right over to the Union side. I don't know, some may know, but it was the work of me being a spy that in the Carolinas, down by the Combahee River, I helped strategically on my own free 700 enslaved people. And we were able to take the land where they had hid their ammunition, and that battle, the Confederates did not win. Of course, in my retirement to my service to the Union Army, it took them a spell to give me my full pension. At first, for all had been accomplished, $200 is what they offered. Later, I was given full pension, and it was just the same amount of the $40,000 that my plantation owner had for my bounty for me, dead or alive. He was fit to be tied for me coming back to that same plantation and freeing not just my sisters and brothers, but my parents too. I tell you, I just know there was something in my blood that just meant we was not to be enslaved any longer. Now, after the war, I did a lot of things for folk. People used to say, oh, I cannot believe she would do such a thing. But I allowed someone to do a medical procedure to relieve something that was going on in my head from a paperweight that had been thrown at me, caused me sleeping spells, even on my freedom journeys. But I never had a spell on a journey to freedom, and I never lost a passenger. But I tell you, I don't know if that surgery worked or not, but I did have that. And I did build a home in Auburn, New York. And I did spend about 8 years or so in the promised land of St. Catherine's, Canada. It's a place where I stayed because some of the issues of post-slavery just didn't fit well for me. And that old Uncle Sam of mine, well, I didn't know what he would do with us. So we moved to St. Catherine's, Canada. And there, I tell you, I had an inkling to come back. And I was one of the first people to own property in Auburn, New York. And technically it was against the law, but it worked out, and I built a home, which became a convalescent care center for others. And I sit on my porch and I think about all the things that I learned in this life. And I knew that always doing for God's people is why the name Moses fit me well. Lots of folk, after slavery had ended, were disconnected from their family. And so I would take in folks to just give them a home and give them family. I planted an apple orchard. I had learned from the Native American to build bricks. And if you're ever in the area, a lot of the homes are built with what we call Tubman bricks. I also had a way about raising ossiball pigs as well as the brick making. Now I tell you, they say, Sister Tubman, we want to know, what would you leave for the children? And I say, well, once they understand those who sacrificed their life for freedom to get out of the bondage of slavery, once they know that all that they had learned to do with their own hands, that they too can do for themselves and take care of their families, well, I'd like for the children to be more like a tree. Now, I'll explain. You see a tree in the springtime, while it takes up all they can as far as helping them have their youngins. Spring is a time for new beginnings. So the squirrels, the ants, birds, raccoons, they all fathom a tree and they take up home. And that tree provides shelter and warmth for those in need. In the summertime, oh, when it's so hot and the sweat upon our brow, while we all go under the tree to hide ourselves and hopefully a cool breeze, while the youngins are climb as high as they can. The higher you are in the tree, the cooler the shade is. And yes, I will get me a limb right off a tree, and I'll go behind some of them youngins that don't mind now, yeah. But that old tree, he never says a mumbling word. And then the fall cometh. Oh, the tree and the crown of glory of leaves that turn from green to yellow and brown and red and orange, and yet they fall to the earth from whence we come and shall return. And that tree, listen, Sharon, it accepts what he cannot change. And then the winter comes, and ooh, though it's cold, and the wind blows, and the snow covers the limbs, and sometimes the ice is over and some limbs fall. But when that old wind stirs, that winter wind, old man winter make you bend. And when it's calm, then you just stand up tall again. I hope for our children to be more like a tree, able to stand in the midst of confusion, bend with the wind, and then stand up tall again, accepting the things in life they cannot change, but taking in children, all the seasons of this life, just one season at a time. That's what Sister Tubman wishes for our children, to be more like the tree. Now I asked just to think a spell and tell me, how can you be more like a tree? Mr. David, would you and your family share how you can be more like a tree. And then Miss Mary Coleman, would you go next? And then Miss Vanessa, would you go next? How can you live one season at a time being like a tree for Sister Tubman?
I don't really know.
Remember, she said a tree. It helps people and helps keep them warm. Do you think that is there something that you can do like that to help people?
Yeah.
Okay, tell Miss Tubman.
I could donate money to provide shelter, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's wonderful. There are so many people right now who are in need of a warm place or a warm blanket, sometimes even a meal. Anything that you can do, the old folk used to say, to pull somebody on along. And so that would be wonderful for you to help provide warmth and shelter for someone in need. Do it be to a fire or floods or anything that could be happening. Sometimes sickness come and folk need help. Very good, very good. So Miss Mary, could you tell me next? Got to take it off of mute. We can't hear you, but if you take it off mute, it should be at the bottom of your screen.
I found it. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I guess I think of a tree as providing life and space for others and support, and they just keep going through the wind and the storms and keep on doing what they do.
Well, you're absolutely right. Sometimes in the midst of the confusion that we have to deal with in this life, you kind of think you can't make it. But if you just remember that someone else is always willing to lend a hand or sometimes just a listening ear. And so I say to you, if you can find an opportunity, even for an organization, to lend or volunteer your time where there may be a need with the literature or maybe even some of like those in the convalescent homes, sometimes they just need somebody to read a good book to them. So yes, that would be wonderful, Miss Mary. And so now, Miss Vanessa, would you please share what can you do to be more like a tree?
To be more like a tree, I would like to go more toward the convalescent home and volunteer there and show my love and just show that they're still appreciated and they're still, with us and they're important.
Very good. After the war was over, there were so many people who had been displaced, and especially once freedom come and we were emancipated, hallelujah, lots of people just didn't know what freedom was going to look like, and they just didn't know what to do or where to go. But to have someone out there to reach back and help, that is exactly what we needed then, and I know there's circumstances in which we will need it now. And so I say to you, whatever you do, make sure that you take each season, one season at a time. And it's important that we embrace our children. So they say at some point that young folk don't want to know about the freedom of what exactly did it mean to be truly emancipated. And I can only say that we have to make sure that these stories and these the meaning of what freedom means. Even to this day, there are people in this world who are not free. Though here in America, we were emancipated in the 1860s, but today there are children around the globe who need a voice, and they need someone to advocate what their freedom could look like if we would all work together and be of good cheer for those who are afflicted with unjust and inequality and this venomous stain of folk not being able to be liberated, to be themselves and think for themselves. Well, that's something we still have to work on. And I say for the Sojourner Truths and for the Nat Turners and for many freedom fighters, Stagecoach Mary, for all of those, Mary Church Terrell and Maggie Lena Walker, those of us who have been fighting this freedom fight, we've got to tell the children what the sacrifice truly was, so that they will know that there are times where their voice can be heard and they can lend support to the things that are in need right now. And that's how they can be more like a tree. I've enjoyed this time we've had. And if you guys have any questions, one poem I would like to share with you at this time. It was written by a woman by the name of Eloise Greenfield. And it's about Harriet Tubman. And I love this piece. It's in her book of poems called Honey, I Love. And the poem goes just like this. Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff. Wasn't scared of nothing neither. Didn't come to this world to be no slave, and she didn't stay one neither. 19 times she went down south to save her sisters and brothers. She ran to the woods and through the woods with them mean men right behind her. Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff. Wasn't scared of nothing neither. Didn't come to this world to be a slave, and she didn't stay one neither. If I could share some information that ties Sister Tubman's experience on the Underground Railroad through Frederick Douglass, she became familiar with a abolitionist right here in Indiana by the name of Levi Coffin. Levi Coffin has his Park Service. The National Park Service has deemed his home on the historical registry, and you can go visit the home of Levi Coffin, who, like Harriet Tubman, they became acquainted because Harriet Tubman raised money for freedom schools, and Levi Coffin donated money to the freedom schools here in Indiana, right in what we call the Tri-County area of Union City and Winchester, Indiana. And if you are an African-American who lives in that Tri-County area now, Tri-City area in that county, can go to Wilberforce College for free. The name of the freedom school that Levi Coffin started and funded was called the Union Literacy School. And he and Harriet Tubman, as well as Frederick Douglass, set up several schools, freedom schools after slavery. And it was Levi Coffin who had to move to go to Cincinnati because he was working the Underground Railroad system through Indiana, which would have went through Hamilton County, up through Cass County, and on to Detroit, in areas of Michigan, not necessarily Detroit, but right over the border of Indiana into Michigan, because Michigan was a place in which people called the Promised Land. And it was the work of Frederick Douglass coming to Hamilton County and speaking both in Noblesville and in Anderson that he met Levi Coffin. Levi Coffin, in turn, was able to work on the committee for the Freedmen Schools with Harriet Tubman. And so I wanted to share that with you as well. People usually ask me about her procedure and surgery. And yes, in 1898, she actually had a surgery where they opened up her cranial front to relieve and to see what was it that caused those sleeping spells from that paperweight. An affliction that she met because she was not obeying the overseer on the plantation. But at this time, I would like to offer you to ask me any questions or help possibly disband a myth or share something else about the wonderful life of this courageous woman, Harriet Tubman. Anyone have a question? Yes, Mr. David?
I have one, but I'm still trying to formulate it in my head, trying to figure out exactly how to say it. Henry, I think Henry was asking earlier just about he was asking about how long ago all of this happened.
Oh, well, his name is Henry.
Henry, yeah.
Henry, I was born in the 1830s and I lived until 1911. And so that would be over 100 years ago that all of this happened. So today we just brought a little bit of history to life for you because the storytelling style that I used today was actually in first person and in second person. So there were where I'm talking about Miss Tubman and where I'm giving you the illusion that I'm speaking in first person as if I was Miss Tubman, but it was actually over 100 years ago. And when she was first born, she was born Arminta, and her mom called her Minty. But once she became free on her first journey, she changed her name to Harriet, which was what her mother's name was. And Tubman was her first husband's name.
That's great, thank you.
There, in Auburn, New York, at the cemetery in which Miss Tubman is laid to rest, it was a full military honored service. Her medals and are still at gravesite. Her tombstone is wonderful. But the beauty of this is that even if you Google where she is laid to rest, there is a very large oak tree. And the roots of this oak tree come above ground and they go down into the ground in the area where she lays to rest. And I say, she wants for the children to be more like a tree, but in reality, she has nourished the tree. And I call it the tree of Harriet's life. If you are ever able to go to the historical site in which she built 2 homes, and one is the convalescent home, her apple orchard, the kiln, the underground kilns where she fired the bricks is still there, and there is a mini museum. And I tell you, it is just amazing to know what she had accomplished, born a slave, but yet set free to do so many wonderful things to help enrich not just our life and culture and history, but to for the others that lived at her time.
And then I guess my question would be is, when are we going to get Harriet's face on the 20 and get that slave master Jackson off there?
You know, there was a petition that came out a year ago for people to sign that. And you know, there's a whole lot that Biden has to do, but I understood that he was revisiting the fact that Trump sent it back another 10 years. I understood that everything is ready, and I think that Biden can be the one, but it's going to take us calling our legislators and our congressmen to for them to our state representatives to say, hey, let's do it. And the time is now with everybody dealing with racial equity through different lenses now. Amen. I think it can happen, but I think it can't happen if we don't raise the voice again. And I'm not sure what's going on with that petition, but I do know the National Council of Negro Women are supporting it wholeheartedly.
Good. Yeah, thank you. I'm actually meeting with someone in Senator Young's office tomorrow. We'll be talking about the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, but maybe I'll bring that up and see what Senator Young thinks.
There's two things on the table. If they can give us the $20 bill of Harriet, then the next thing they got to do is give us reparations. Amen. So you tell Senator Young I said it. I better be careful. Listen, I will accept any other questions or comments. I'm just very pleased. I am representing Arts for Learning. I am an artist building community fellow, and I'm just really glad that you all took the time this evening to tune in for Courage and Wisdom of Harriet. I really love doing this character, and usually for school audiences, I do ask the children those questions. We do sing the authentic chants. It's important that they know about why it was necessary for the coded messages, and they understood, you know, the stations, the abolitionists. Now, I kind of think that I might have skated over that in more detail because it wasn't a school audience tonight. But again, if you have any questions while we still have time, I can entertain them at this time.
I have a question. My question is, where did Harriet Tubman exactly take the slaves?
Let me make sure I heard that again. Say that one more time.
When she rescued them, when Harriet Tubman rescued her other slave members, where exactly did she take them?
Well, son, I'll say this. When they would clear or leave a plantation, lots of times they were coming from the slave quarters, sometimes straight out of the fields while working up under the overseer's eye. But what they were able to do was there were safe houses or safe places. Sometimes they were in caves. Sometimes they were just hidden under a makeshift hideout in the woods. Sometimes she would build places on the riverbank where they could tunnel and build, kind of like a beaver builds a dam, where they would hide. Sometimes they were hidden in the bottom of a wagon. Sometimes, like for an example, at the Levi Coffin home, they hid them in between walls and rooms, which meant that the Underground Railroad had been going on so long that people purposely built hiding ways in their homes and in their barns for this dangerous, courageous work of helping people to freedom. They walked in the river. Sometimes they were on boats. Sometimes they were hideaways or stowaways on the steamships coming up and down the Ohio and the Mississippi River. So where did they take them to safe places? So if you were coming from Virginia or Maryland or Kentucky, you would go, the closest place you could get to freedom was usually in Philadelphia. Lots of people went to New York because New York was a free state, but the Freedom Bureau office in Philadelphia was ran by William Steele and other abolitionists. And they would find other safe places to house them if they were truly wanting to go to Canada. And again, Canada was referred to as the promised land, or heaven for that matter. So there were routes that took you to different counties and different towns until you made it to a freedom place in which you didn't have to hide anymore.
So I have a question. How long was the journey from slavery to the promised land in Canada?
Depending on how you traveled. So history tells us that Henry Box Brown was in Virginia, put himself in a box and mailed himself to the Freedom Bureau office, and he came out of that box, he was free. Now, how long he ended up on a boat, I believe, to get where he was, to get to the Philadelphia. However, the journey could take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks, depending on the bounty hunters, the people, they call them slave catchers, depending on how hot it was for them to be moving about to make it to the free place. So you may be stuck in a barn or in someone's home, or even in a cave for days at a time until one of the station masters would come and let you know it was safe to go to the next safe house or safe place. Again, Harriet's journeys, especially when during the Civil War, those journeys were over a week long easily. And it wasn't about the mileage per day that they would walk or ride. It was about the movement to avoid the capture, the people who wanted to capture them and take them back to slavery. So that time frame had a lot to do with the strategic planning of keeping them safe and not to be caught on their way to freedom.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Portia, the man that you mentioned that put himself in a box and mailed himself to freedom, if you visit the Underground Railroad Museum in Cincinnati, they have a replica of that
Of
box.
the box
That you can
mailed himself?
actually get inside of and see
how cramped he was.
How cramped he was and how long he had to stay in there. So if anybody ever has a chance to visit that museum, it's a great place to visit. And there's actually a film where they show, I want to say it was Levi Coffin, but I'm not really sure, the man whose house was on the Ohio River that was a part of the Underground Railroad.
That's
and I want to say the house is still there, and it's a historical
the house was still there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not Levi Coffin's house. Levi Coffin's house is in Fountain City, but the house that he had in Cincinnati didn't make the historical register. But I know what's, call it a senior moment, you know,
me too.
Right now. And there's some really good stories about, and I even tell a story about a slave coming up over the river from Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, and over into Cincinnati to that house. He was a Black man who was free, and he was the station, and it still exists. And they called him, he had a surname, and then they called him Father.
I want to say he was a priest or something. I can't remember, but they show a short film.
Short film about it.
Where
I'm
Oprah
sorry,
is
I can't call his
the
name.
narrator.
But you're absolutely right. And he helped a lot of people. And a lot of them either were stowed over on a boat or they swam. A lot of people swam across the river from Kentucky over to be the legacy up over there in that area. They used to call it Bucktown in Cincinnati. That's where that place is, Bucktown. But I can't call his name, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll think of it like in 2 weeks. It'll hit
Yeah,
me.
as soon as I get off here, then I'll go, that's it. Senior moment. I really have a good time sharing with the youth, especially when we're singing and I'm explaining, the words to particular songs, not just the Possum in the Bush song. And that really makes them happy. And then the only other myth I like to dispel is that if the Underground Railroad was a secret, Sister Tubman herself in more than one interview said that she lost count of all the people she helped to freedom, but the folks that counted were her immediate family. And though there's not a lot of mention about the 700 slaves that she freed off of 3 counties plantations with one act, with the Union, the colored troops, the 104th Regiment, that was some Queen Nzinga military masterminding Harriet was able to accomplish. And when we talk about, the things that Harriet Tubman did, I guess some people think it's just not enough time, but Harriet Tubman was awesome in her efforts to free enslaved people. And she, we say 300 but it's way more. And she says that. And if you ever get a chance to braze through William Steele's book, The Underground Railroad, even he alludes that he knows about 500 or 600 that happened in about a year, but history is not teaching us that. And so you have to really dive into her life that's recorded to know she saved a lot of people. She is truly the Moses of our people.
Thank you, Portia. This was a
You're
great
welcome.
addition to our workshop series, and especially to celebrate Women's History Month and have a wonderful woman like yourself to talk to us about Harriet Tubman. And we thank Harriet for showing up for us this evening as well. So I'm going to have Angelina launch our poll for us.
Oh, there's no poll this evening.
Oh, there's no poll. So we get all stars today.
Oh, bless your heart. Bless your heart. Although I will, from the Arts for Learning, send you out something, Mrs. Henderson.
Okay, awesome. And then we can share it out. And please remember that we record these sessions and they're on our new YouTube channel so that we can continue to go back and reflect and use as a resource, and also to share with others. Thank you, Henry, for joining us this evening. It was nice having a little person on the call. All right, and I'm sorry that our singing wasn't better, Portia.
That we were, because of the delay in the distance, the fact that you were able, I could hear you all, that's all that mattered. Yeah. And I hope that some of the places where they took off their videos, that they had some children involved. That is my hope. But
and I didn't realize that Wade in the Water and Swing Low Sweet Chariot were coded songs.
Oh, yes.
Too. So yes, thank you guys. Thanks everybody. Again, just some housekeeping things. We have 2 more weeks of barrier busting funds available. So please get your applications in, and also remember that we're approaching our scholarship deadline March 30th or April 1st. I get my days all mixed up. I apologize, but you'll get plenty of correspondence from our team about our scholarship deadline. So if you have any questions, please let myself or Kelsey know, or Angelina or Shayna, or anyone that you come in contact with from the CI team. So have a great week. We hope to see you guys at the museum over spring break. When I left today, it was pretty packed. So I was excited to see the number of people in the museum. And so it's picking back up and we're really glad. So get your COVID vaccines when you have a chance, if you're able.
Amen.
And we'll pray that everybody stays safe and healthy.
Bye.